Among the Democratic Party candidates for Western North Carolina's congressional seat, Zelda Briarwood is probably the only one who has worked one-on-one with people in addiction recovery and victims of trafficking and sexual violence. Social service casework was their career for the longest time, but Briarwood says it leads to a kind of burnout. Today, they make a living fixing ATM machines. But what Briarwood saw at the street level all those years isn't too removed from the heartache, anger, frustration, and helplessness they feel so many experiencing now under Donald Trump. Now, to this point, their only brush with politics is serving as the secretary, currently, for the Young Democrats of Haywood County. But like many others, Briarwood said they feel called to direct action. Early last year, they looked at this region's most direct channel to the federal government, that would be the congressional seat now held by Republican Chuck Edwards, and thought there needs to be a change.
People are done with the games, done with people going to Congress and ultimately not representing the people that they're supposed to. We have heard constantly that everyone is struggling. That's not the American way.
I'm Matt Peiken. Today on this special episode of Wake Up Asheville, Zelda Briarwood talks about their varied roles in the social services, their community-centered campaign, and their approach to addressing the economy, healthcare, education, and social safety nets. I began this conversation by asking what inspired them to get involved with the Young Democrats of Haywood County.
So after Helene, I did a lot of reflecting on what it is that I want to do in order to show up for my community. When the thought of running for public office came into my head, the little ball of anxiety that I have that sits like underneath my heart that I've had my entire life, it was gone for 10 solid seconds. And if that's not Providence, I don't know what is. So what I did was I ran with it. I reached on out to my local chapters. I reached on out to the Buncombe County Democratic Party as well as the Haywood County Young Democratic Party. I got introduced to Jesse Ross. I ended up getting elected as secretary. And from there, I have just been interacting a little bit more, better understanding Haywood County's needs. And then as I've been campaigning, expanding further and further out.
So you became secretary of the Haywood County Young Democrats. You would think an initial step might be running for city council or some smaller municipal race. You're shooting pretty high for Congress. Why?
I am shooting for Congress because I am sick of waiting for competency to actually show up to Capitol Hill. I'm sick of seeing the exact same kind of person be elected and us doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I actually want to represent the working class people, the people that we're supposed to be representing up in Congress. And in my time just watching the political theater that's been going on for decades, I've gotten more and more discouraged. And I think a lot of the younger generation is going to feel very similar to that because it's the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And continuing on this trend that we have of politics as usual is not getting us anywhere.
How do you see yourself as bringing the unusual? You're talking right now in some macro levels, tired of not seeing things getting done. How can a young Democrat from Haywood County come into Congress and get things done? What kinds of things on the ground level do you see yourself wanting to bring that to your eyes isn't happening right now?
So our campaign follows what I like to call a community-centered campaign approach. What we did after announcing, we spent the next 7 months keeping our operating costs as low as possible and just spent time traveling Western North Carolina and talking with people, understanding what their needs, wants, and expectations are. From there, we developed our platform. It is not a platform that has been told to me by any specific party. It is not my agenda. It is the agenda of the people of Western North Carolina. And I think that is incredibly important to name because when we look at people who have run in the past, how often are they actually polling the people, talking with the people to figure out what it is that they need, and continuing to develop that platform, cultivate it, and edit the platform as necessary based off of what their constituency is saying?
Yeah, you said that you've been at this for 7 months. That's declaring quite a long time ago in what is generally a short electoral cycle for Congress. Yeah, so 7 months ago, I don't think anybody was talking about who's going to be running right now. Tell me, in those 7 months, what did you hear that has stamped your platform?
Absolutely. People are done with the games, done with people going to Congress and ultimately not representing the people that they're supposed to. We have heard constantly that everyone is struggling. The economy is not working, that people's health care is exorbitantly priced, finding jobs is awful. Education is failing our younger generations. And people's right to individuality and right to bodily autonomy is being taken away from them. And in my opinion, I would agree with the sentiment, that's not the American way.
So what are you running on? What are you saying you're going to do in specific ways? I imagine the other people who are running for the Democratic primary nod are coming from the same vantage points you are in terms of the things you're talking about, the things that aren't getting done. How do you see yourself distinguishing yourself in this primary, which I guess by any estimation would be an uphill climb? So what kinds of things specifically do you think set you apart and what you want to do if you get to Congress, as opposed to a Jimmy Ager or Paul Maddox or Dr. Hudspeth or any of the other people running? What do you bring to this, and what do you want to do?
I've had real tangible solutions to the problems at hand basically since June, and we continue to update them as necessary. I actually have experience with things like public health and social services.
Let's talk about a couple of those things. You said you have some tangible solutions. Can you talk about those solutions in concrete ways?
Sure. So when we talk about things like the economy, we need to close tax loopholes for the wealthy. We need to stop taxing the heck out of the working class and below. We need to actually tax billionaires and corporations, so that way we have money that is coming in and not putting unnecessary burden on people who are struggling. We need to lift up people out of poverty, and that requires having a minimum wage that is going to be able to support people. Because let's think about it. Back in the 1960s, one person could support a family of 5 with a full-time job. And we're talking have a house, have a car, make sure that there's food on the table, and also be able to take vacations. And that's not the case anymore. And if we are going to continue as a country, our focus needs to be on the people. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
How can you as a congressperson get us on that right track? What are things that people in Congress can do that, from your vantage, they're not doing right now?
When I look at the Democratic Party, I see failure when it comes to the working class. The Democratic Party is supposed to be there for the average American and supporting them, and I'm not seeing policies that are reflective of that. If the Democratic Party was actually supporting average Americans, we would be advocating for things like health care for all. We would be advocating for things like closing those tax loopholes. We would be advocating for better teacher pay and free school meals to students and bridge programs in order to make sure people have other options besides going straight into the workforce or going into college. Adding to our social safety nets and making sure that they are strengthened. And I will name that it's not just the Democratic Party that's been failing as well. It's the Republican Party. I would look at Congress as a whole and say that in general, we are not representing the people. What is being represented are the corporations, billionaires, and oligarchs that are right now propping up the economy.
This is kind of a bonus week for Wake Up Asheville, but if you're tuning in for the first time to hear from our congressional candidates, you should make it a point to subscribe, because every weekday morning I produce the most comprehensive local newscast in Asheville. I scour the headlines and top stories from the Citizen Times, BPR, The Watchdog, Mountain Express, WLOS, and more, and then boil them all down into a newscast that runs under 4 minutes. Wake Up Asheville keeps you in the know when you're on the go. If you haven't already, subscribe for free right here on your podcasting app. You mentioned Republicans having a role in this. Obviously, Chuck Edwards, our current congressperson from this region, is a Republican. Can you point to anything Chuck Edwards has done or hasn't done that you find particularly glaring as an individual Republican?
69,000 individuals in Western North Carolina, District 11, are about to lose their health insurance.
And what can a congressperson, what could he have done or should he have done to help make that not happen?
Let's think about the fact that there was supposed to be a vote on the floor in regards to extending the tax subsidies when it comes to
Affordable Care Act.
Affordable Care Act. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it might not be 60,000 individuals who are losing it, but seeing their premiums skyrocket. I have had so many horror stories from people all across Western North Carolina, all of the counties, reflecting that when they reach on out, it's basically met with gaslighting, dismissive rhetoric, and to the point where right now, after Chuck Edwards had that disastrous town hall last year, he only does virtual town halls and makes sure that any of the questions that are being asked are specifically catered. He doesn't like opposition. And anytime that a constituent comes and tries to meet with him and explain what's going on to him, he doesn't care.
You talked a little bit ago about your own work experience and lived experience playing a role in shaping where you're coming from. Can you talk a little more specifically about what elements of your lived and work experience feed your platform and what you're running on?
Sure. Let's just do my case management and victim service practitioner role at Our Voice. When there, I worked alongside the SANE nurses over at Mission Hospital. I worked with APD, the SVU. I worked with the Buncombe County Sheriff's Department. I also worked with the District Attorney's Office. I worked with Helpmate. I worked with Homeward Bound. I also worked with a bunch of other counties and their battered women's shelters, domestic abuse shelters, what have you. When that happens, you are exposed to so many different aspects of our social safety net, our public services, and how they function. And I want to take that and bring it to the table up in Congress, because let's think about this. I look at Congress and I can think of, I don't know, maybe 5 people who actually know what it's like to be working class, actually have experience relying on our social safety nets, actually have an understanding of what public health and social services look like. Everyone else is either legislators, businessmen, or doctors, for the most part.
You said you've been spending time going out to all over Western North Carolina. We are predominantly outside of Asheville and the core, pretty red region. Have you been talking to people who were or are Trump supporters? And how do you bridge that gap? Because I imagine you're going to need to win over the votes of a lot of people who are either self-described Republicans or maybe disaffected Democrats who voted for Trump. What have you been hearing, and how do you communicate to those people about the things that matter to you?
When you work in direct care, you learn very quickly that imposing your will and your beliefs and your perspective onto another person is not going to work. In fact, it can get you fired. What you learn to do is display a level of unconditional positive regard and ask questions and approach from a lens of curiosity. What ends up happening is when you talk to someone just face to face, same level, about what's going on in their life and actively listen and try to better understand what their perspective is, that brings the opportunity for people to start opening up. And when that happens, you actually have an opportunity for growth. And by asking these questions and having genuine conversations with people, not talking down to them and telling them, well, I just don't believe your experience, or you're going to have to suck it up.
Yeah, what are you hearing then in these conversations that you have either found surprising or humbling, or that has maybe changed or at least affected your outlook on some of these key issues?
After Helene, we saw our district come together and defiantly fight for each other. We didn't care if you were Republican or Democrat, what the color of your skin was, any of those things. We went straight to work and we took care of our neighbors because that's how you do it. That's how it's supposed to be done. You put the rhetoric aside because people are people, and human needs were absolutely necessary in that point. When that happens, there is a fundamental cultural shift. Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Katrina, it follows suit that after major natural disasters, the level of community and camaraderie that people experience post-disaster, it doesn't go away. People get that sense of community and camaraderie and recognize how much of a difference it makes when we are united as people rather than left or right. Having that experience, people realize where the focus needs to be.
I didn't ask you your age. How old are you?
35. I actually just turned 35 yesterday.
Wow, gosh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
So 35, I'm wondering, so you're still relatively young in this political theater. I'm wondering, do you have any role models? Are there people either regionally within the Democratic Party that you've talked to? The last person who ran for this seat 2 years ago, Caleb Rudow. I don't know if you know him. Great guy, and espouses a lot of the same things you're talking about. And I'm just curious if you've received wisdom from anybody locally, regionally, or nationally.
Yeah. I have a lot of aspiration for representatives like Julie Mayfield and Lindsay Prather. I have immense respect for Jeff Jackson. I love how he approaches it from a explain it like I'm 5 level. Here's what's happening. Here's the information I can provide to you. Here is how it's going to affect you. And it's not talking down. It's just providing that and doing it in a way that doesn't come off as condescending. If we're going on the national level, I look at AOC. I look at Bernie Sanders. I look at Jasmine Crockett, Ilhan Omar. All of these people are champions of the working class, champions of the average American, not billionaires, not corporations, but the people that they are supposed to be representing.
Getting back to the distinguishing elements, what do you think you have to do to win this campaign? None of these candidates have run for this seat before, but exposure means a lot. What do you think you have to do to win this primary?
I think at the end of the day, people want to see something different than what they've seen before. People want to know that they can vote for a candidate that actually practices what they preach, that wants to be held accountable, that believes in things like honesty, integrity, willingness to change, and is in it for the right reasons. As of right now, I can definitively say that is me. And a way that I can go about that is I will abide by a vote of no confidence. Through a ballot measure, if the question is posed, should Zelda Briarwood, as a congresswoman, step down because we've lost faith in her, 60% of the electorate votes and says that, I will step down of my own accord, not because there's a law, but because it's the right thing to do. And I have yet to see any of the other candidates be willing to do that exact same thing. What I'm doing is not backing down from a fight, not going to sit there and just let the standard rhetoric continue, calling out BS when it happens to it, fact-checking in the moment, and actually showing compassion, care, and wanting to make a difference to the people of Western North Carolina.
I want to thank Jamie Ager for today's conversation. This episode is one of 4 rolling out this week, featuring candidates on the Democratic Party primary ballot to represent Western North Carolina in Congress. Please tune in and share these episodes with people you believe need to be better informed and inspired going into the March 3rd primary. If you haven't already, also subscribe to Wake Up Asheville. We'll be back in February with morning newscasts every weekday with headlines from across the local news media landscape. Until then, I'm Matt Peiken. Thanks so much for waking up with Wake Up Asheville.